Hi, everyone. My name is Sheridan, and I had the pleasure to work on this presentation with my fellow teammates, Quiva, Garrett, and Madeline. Today, as a group, we decided to look into the topic of power and influence, and more specifically, wanted to find answers regarding the question of how does the type of power within a team influence the culture cycle? There are two types of power that are commonly used in teams, and this includes either personal soft power or positional harsh power. First, personal power contains three forms of power underneath it, which include expert, referent, and informational. Expert power comes from the belief that a person's credibility and authority is derived from their high level of knowledge or specialized skill set. This person does not have to be the leader of a group or of a high rank in order to gain this expert power. Reverent power revolves around an employee's respect for their higher ups and admiration to be like them. Reverent power likes to lead by example and is deeply rooted in gaining the trust of those who are following the leader. Informational power is when there is control over information that another party needs or wants. The power comes from the possession. The other type of power, which is positional, includes legitimate reward and coercive power underneath it. Legitimate power is when a manager or higher up is given the right to control others based on his authority or position. A problem with legitimate authority, though, is that commitment and trust is not always in the picture because people may only comply because of the authoritative figure that is above them. Reward power is associated with positive reinforcement. Rewards can come in the form of money, praise, or working environment and team improvements. Coercive power is grounded in threatening or punishment and fear-based dysfunctional behavior. The motivation to work comes from the fear of losing their job or position under the boss.
There are three main styles of power: a passive style, aggressive style, and assertive style. The passive or non-assertive style is a person who is polite and deferential, and their main goal is to avoid issues. This leads to resentment and confusion, however, as the passive person resents the people he or she is passive against, which leads to them becoming passive aggressive. And it also causes the people they are passive towards to become confused on their actual views. This is mainly used in situations of unequal status and that the passive person is normally of lower authority. Next is the aggressive style, which is characterized by a forceful and critical person whose main focus is winning the conversation. This causes satisfaction and withdrawal, and that it brings satisfaction to the person who is winning the conversation. However, it causes the others to withdraw from the conversation as they know it won't go anywhere for them. This is normally prevalent in emergencies and situations of unequal status as well. However, the aggressive person is normally of higher authority. Lastly, there is the assertive power style, which is characterized by a clear and confident person who values problem solving. This brings satisfaction and trust into the equation, as it is satisfying for the assertive person to know that the people he is talking to are listening, and it also creates a sort of trust between him and his audience, as his audience knows that he is also open to their views as well. This is the case of most situations, especially when the status is equal. That's why leaving your status at the door is such a huge tactic in team decision making, because once everyone's status is equal, they're all able to have this assertive power style, which allows for the most efficient teamwork since they all value problem solving.
The main focus of our project was to figure out how power styles and power types influence the culture cycle. We decided to focus on sports and teamwork to narrow our findings and solidify ideas. So when we first started thinking about this, we figured that power types impact all culture cycles uniquely in the choice of power style. So whether an individual identifies with an assertive style, a passive style, or an aggressive style. And then it also impacts the culture cycle in interactions with authority and teammates. And we also wanted to explore all parts of the culture cycle, so ideas, institutions, individuals, and interactions to get a full picture of how power impacts it. So with that in mind, how are power types, personal or positional, and power styles related through different culture cycles. So this is an image of the culture cycle. It is an iterative model that shows the ways ideas, institutions, interactions, and individuals influence each other. We've seen this graphic in class. It's just a reminder to see what each of those components mean. So in our study, our hypothesis was that people who prioritize personal power are more likely to favor an assertive power style throughout all culture cycles. So we created a Google Forms for our survey, and we asked participants about demographic information such as age, class, gender, and socioeconomic status. We then asked them about their individual thoughts, ideas, personal interactions, and institutional experiences with regards to power in teams. We also asked participants about their identity in terms of power style and power type. So a majority of our participants, 89% of them, were between the ages of 18 and 23. This is not very surprising because we sent out the survey on Cal Poly forums such as Reddit and Facebook, so we expected a majority of our participants to be college-age students. However, if we had a wider age range, the results of this survey could have varied. So the gender breakdown was about 30% male and 70% female. Because of this, our results may skew towards a female culture cycle or female experience rather than an even distribution. We also asked participants about their socioeconomic status. Again, not surprisingly, a majority of our participants were middle class. Because we surveyed college students, we expected that a majority of them would be middle class. However, if we had a more equal distribution, or if we had targeted working class individuals, our results may have varied. So this is the breakdown of how power types and power styles influence each other and what was most popular overall in participants. So the most popular pairing was a personal power type and an assertive power style. 64% of our participants said that they identify most with an assertive style and a personal power type. Then the second most popular pairing was positional power type and assertive power style. So overall, a majority of our participants identified with an assertive style. Between personal and passive and positional and passive, there is not much of a difference. So within those people who chose or who identified with a passive power style, there's not much of a difference between whether they chose a personal power type or a positional power type. And then lastly, none of our participants chose a personal power type and aggressive power style, and 7.1% of participants chose a positional power type and aggressive power style, meaning that 100% of people who identified with an aggressive power style also chose a positional power type as most moral.
Our study showed us that 70% of participants considered personal power to be the most moral method of power distribution. Morality is a part of the participants' ideas that have great influence within the culture cycle. As the participant travels through life, they are likely to translate that method of power distribution into their institutional work and interactions with people. So, for example, a principal of a school might conduct a meeting with his teachers in which he requests that everyone leaves their status at the door so that everyone and their interactions with each other are of equal value amongst each other. Our study also showed us that 82% of participants identified most with an assertive power style, This power style within individuals can directly influence the culture cycle by decreasing or increasing effective communication between coworker, teammate, and boss interactions. In an area like government, someone with an assertive power type will be more focused on solving the political problem at hand rather than, say, an aggressive power type that would prioritize being the winner of the discussion without actively seeking to discover the best solution for the team. And finally, 95% of participants claimed that the power from a coach they would see as most influential is power derived from knowledge and experience, or personal power. And 95% also claimed that the power from a teammate they would see as most influential is power derived from a teammate's skills and knowledge, so also personal power. This general consensus that power and authority should come from credibility based on knowledge, experience, and skills can influence an individual's mindset on how they treat others around.
Now, to get more specific, when looking at the individual responses, we were able to collect data based on what genders prefer what power types and power styles. Dividing up the data above gave us a much more accurate insight in regards to power and gender, since overall we had a majority of female responses. We did have an other or prefer not to answer option in the gender question. However, we just did not receive any data with those responses. So through the data, we found that despite gender, people tend to have an assertive power style. What is interesting about this, however, is that according to week 8 modules reading of Levi chapter 8, power styles are more like behaviors and that they change depending on the situation. Thus, when asking the question, we specified what kind of style they would most identify with in a team environment. This was foreseen in our hypothesis as we figured most people would want to take on the style that most values problem solving, thus taking on the assertive power style. However, when asking what people thought the most effective method of power distribution is in a team, we figured data would unanimously support the personal type, as most people we know prefer having equal power distribution through the team, which allows for more idea diversity and would allow for a higher social sensitivity, which according to Woolley has a direct correlation to a higher collective intelligence for a team, which increases the team's performance. Now, while females preferred the personal type, which coincides with the fact that females score higher in the social sensitivity factor in Woolley's study, based on our data, even though it is kind of limiting to males, it is seen that males tend to lean towards the positional power type, which at least shows that males share a higher preference for a power hierarchy in teams than females do. Now, this makes sense in regards to culture cycles, as male culture cycles seem to correlate more to independent work. Thus, a power hierarchy and a positional power type would allow them to have more independent work within the team, whereas a female culture cycle is more shaped by interdependent culture cycles. Thus, they would value the personal power type as they would feel more in an independent team with a power type that revolves everybody having an equal share of the power. Again, being able to parse through individual responses, we were able to make direct correlations between power and socioeconomic status. Given our data, I will focus on the middle and upper class as there was not enough data to make any supported conclusions about the working class, given the fact that we only had one working class respondent. So overall, both middle and upper classes seem to favor assertive power styles when working in teams, and found personal power types to be the most successful in teams as well. This supports our hypothesis as it illustrates that despite socioeconomic status, people still found the relation between assertive style and personal power most effective when working in a team environment. What we found interesting, however, was in the data of those who did not follow the norm of choosing assertive and personal powers. As you can see, the upper class respondents were much more likely to choose an aggressive power style when not choosing an assertive one. In fact, none of the upper class respondents actually chose to have a passive style. This directly correlates as to how the upper class culture cycles see themselves as dominating, influencing others, and wanting to express their contribution. The opposite stands true in that the middle class had the more respondents that saw themselves as having more of a passive style rather than an aggressive one. This totally made sense as in relation to upper class, lower and middle class culture cycles have a higher focus on learning from those who are above them and valuing superior perspectives. Through the survey, we found multiple significant findings. The first is that 64% of participants who chose personal power as the most moral method of power distribution also favored an assertive power style. With this, there was a positive correlation with assertive power style and personal power types. This relationship between the assertive power style that values problem solving and the personal power type that allows teams to share the power throughout everyone completely correlates to a more modern type of culture cycle, one that we see every day on college campuses, and that students value their self-confidence and equality between each other and a value of shared perspective. We also found that 100% of participants who identified with an aggressive power style also favored positional power. In fact, if participants identified with a passive or aggressive power style, they were actually more likely to choose positional power as the most effective power distribution in a team, rather than the popular personal power type. The reason for this is because the culture cycles revolving the positional power type involves two main roles in the power hierarchy. The first role is that of the person who is leading the meeting or the conversation. That person would more than likely be taking on the aggressive power style, as it would be them who is talking to the audience and not taking in any other perspectives except his or her own. Then there would be the audience who take on the second part of the positional power hierarchy of the people who are taking on a passive power style. These people wouldn't be able to really voice their opinion to the person who is leading the conversation and would more or less just be listening to what they have to say without having any significant input of their own.
Now I'm going to be talking a little bit about our novel approach. In our study, 91.3% of participants believe that organizations such as the NCAA, the NBA, the NFL, and others should give sports teams more autonomy, which is the right of a team or organization to be independent or govern itself. Organizations should promote a coaching style that prioritizes positive personal characteristics and experience rather than reputation or formal status within the organization. Promoting personal power works best in teams and organizations. So to help sports teams with power dynamics, the NCAA should promote a coaching style that prioritizes power-centered and experience rather than power-centered and formal status. They should also prioritize coaches who care about their players for more than just their athletic performance. Lastly, the NCAA should promote a personal power type approach by giving teams within the NCAA more autonomy. Through our survey, we found that there are many beliefs about power that have the ability to directly influence the culture cycle. Considering the methods of power distribution allow the individual to question any grounded cultural ideas about what is truly moral and powerful. These ideas about power, such as what power style is most apparent and which power type is most favored amongst our participants, can play direct roles into their interactions with others around them, such as teammates, coworkers, and figures within organizations. These workforce and sport interactions will influence how institutions such as schools, markets, and the government make decisions within their organizations about who should carry the most power. Analyzing the different power types and styles gives us a great idea of the mindset people possess when they interact with others and what they are looking for and prioritize when they join a team. So some limitations within our study were the majority of our participants were female at just about 70%. Also, 77.78% of the participants who favored personal power type and identified with an assertive power style were female. The survey being female dominated could skew our results because females are more likely to use personal power rather than positional power. Additionally, we only surveyed Cal Poly students, and the majority of participants were from upper and middle class backgrounds.
I decided to do my part of the presentation on an article that I had found quite relevant to our group's topic and thesis, which I had accessed through the course content. The name of the article that I decided to analyze is referred to as the Too Much Talent Effect, and is quite helpful in making real-world comparisons to our findings. Within this study, Schwab and fellow researchers conducted an experiment that reviewed the relationship between the talent of a team or organization and their overall performance. Results of their pre-research survey revealed that a large portion of the public believe that there is a linear relationship between talent and performance. Schwab and his team examined the correlation of talent and performance by analyzing professional athletic organizations, some of which were the NBA, the NFL, as well as the MLB. So, upon taking the time to look at the results and the data that the researchers were able to collect, the data proved that the public was incorrect. So, in fact, Schwab et al. Found that when an organization has a large surplus of talent, performance is beneficial, but only up to a certain point. Once a team has acquired too much talent, it has a negative effect and is actually detrimental to the team's overall performance. These findings are especially prevalent for interdependent organizations, some of which are the NBA and the NFL, and the impact has been seen to be less severe in groups that are more independent, such as the MLB. So, upon taking the time to kind of make those crucial connections within the article to our hypothesis, I was able to find that personal power emphasizes empowering others with any team using knowledge to achieve a common goal. Schwab et al. Supports the use of personal power in his study by explaining that once there are too many highly ranked members, the goal of the individual overpowers the goal of the organization. Having too much skill can lead to undermining the efficiency and achievement of those with the same ranking. Practicing personal power includes bringing all members' skills and talents together to have peak performance. Overall, I found this article to be very insightful in applying real-world evidence and examples in which personal power is the most successful leadership method and most commonly supports team performance.